welcome back to my channel. Today's video is another tutorial for you all today, and I know that I haven't actually been doing too many tutorials lately, but my last video was also a tutorial, so I feel like I'm getting back into the old school groove of actually doing my videos and doing more tutorials for Lightroom and Photoshop. And today's video is going to be a Lightroom tutorial. And I haven't done one of these types of tutorials specifically in quite a while, and it's on how to get a nice retro look with your beauty images or your studio close-up photography. So I find that there's not always a lot of tutorials out there for close-up images, and as a beauty photographer specifically, I do find this very difficult to sometimes do. With my coloring and my toning, it is harder to work in different colors and different presets into beauty images. I think because it's so close up, you're focusing on skin so much, so any sort of push of the sliders too far in either direction can sort of make the image look a bit funny, or the tones can be a little bit off. So there's kind of like a bit of an art to doing it, and I've definitely tried to put my experience a little bit into this video of doing presets within Lightroom. And I thought I'd share this tutorial with you today because I actually just opened up Lightroom the other day and had a bit of a play around with colors, and I thought that this looked really good as in terms of a retro kind of look that you can get with your beauty images or studio images. And before we start the video, I'm just going to do a shameless plug right now for my presets. I am having a Black Friday sale on my website, so if you head over there now, you will get 30% off all preset bundles and 20% off individual preset sets. So if you use the codes Friday30 for bundles and Friday20 for sets, you're able to get those discounts over there right now on my website. If you'd like to go and check them out, the link is in the description. So I'm going to get straight into it today, and we're going to go over to the right hand side here in the Develop tab. And as you can see, my profile at the moment is Adobe Color. Now, I don't usually use Adobe Color. I actually tend to use Camera Faithful a little bit more as my color profile. So I'm actually going to use Adobe Color today because I feel like it suits this image better. I have tested it out with Camera Faithful, but I think honestly on this occasion it does look better with Adobe Color. So if you're doing this on your own Lightroom settings, I am starting off with Adobe Color on a raw image. So we're going to go straight down to exposure. Now I feel like this image is a little bit on the dull side. I think most of my images are generally a little bit underexposed. That's generally just how I like to shoot. And something that I've just kind of taken on over the years in doing with my work. I just tend to underexpose a little bit. I think that sometimes it helps the highlights retain the detail a little bit more, and that's why I like to do that sometimes. So with the exposure, we're going to move this up a little bit to around that mark, I'd say. I want it to be quite bright, and I do want the highlights to pop in this image, and we are sort of going for that washed out kind of retro look too, so I do want to make sure that the tones, the lighting is perfect as well there. So we're actually going to move the highlights up too, and I'm going to move this up to actually we can move this up quite a fair way. I think I really want the highlights to pop, so probably about to there for now. The shadows I'm going to move up a little bit as well because Kate the model here has dark hair, so I want that detail to be retained in the image. So I'm just going to move the shadows up a little bit just so you can see the texture in her hair a little bit more. And then I'm going to move the whites up here as well, just to kind of move some of the mid-tone whites up a little bit. And we're sort of retaining that nice brightness about the image. I'm going to scroll down now, and we're going to go to this tab here, Presence. Now, textures are fairly new slider that we have in Lightroom now, and I actually quite like it. I think it's great for beauty images. If you're wanting to bring back immediate texture into the image, it's a really good way to do it. So I don't tend to go too overboard with it though, because it can start to look a bit strange, but I am going to move that up just a little bit, just to bring a little bit of detail and sharpness back into the image. Along with clarity, I always like using clarity to help bring that bit more detail back. So about to there. Okay, now I'm going to keep scrolling down, and we're going to move on to tone curve. Now this is where a lot of our coloring is going to be coming from today in Lightroom, so I'm going to go into the red channel first off. So just clicking here and going into the red channel. And I'm going to move the curve just up slightly in the reds. Not too much, because if we do move it too much, it can look a bit strange. It can look a bit too warm. So probably just about to there is fine at this stage. Then we're going to move into the green channel. And I'm going to start just adjusting a couple of points on here. So I'm going to move the curve down a little bit into the pinks. So probably around about there. I don't want it to be too strong with the coloring. And then I'm going to move this up into the greens, a point up here. And we're sort of getting that cross-processing look that we do want for a retro kind of image. We want some greens and yellows in the highlights, so that's kind of what we're putting in there now. And I've got some sort of pinks and warmer tones in the shadows at the moment. So I'm just going to move this up a little bit, probably to around there. I'm being very careful not to adjust the skin tone coloring too much because that can look strange. Like I said, it's all about really knowing the balance, especially when you're editing beauty images and close-up imagery. It's just finding that right balance with the skin tone too. So I'm going to go into the blue channel now. And once again, I'm going to move a point here, and I'm going to move that up just into the blues. So that's going to affect mainly the shadows. And then we're going to move another point up here, back down. So we're creating that S curve, by the way, in a lot of these curves. That's usually, I find, the best way to go when you are working with curves. And then we're going to bring this point down just a little bit to around there. So we've got that yellow highlight that we're kind of looking for with a retro image. And we've got that nice S curve that I was talking about before. So now we're going to move on. Down we go to hue, saturation, and luminance. I'm going to start with hue first. And we're going to move the orange. So I actually feel like these colors are starting to work well, but I do find that the skin tone is looking a little bit too yellow/green. So I just want to move that across a little bit more here with the hue panel. I'm going to move the oranges and yellows across. So what we're doing here with the orange is it's picking up the yellows and oranges in the image, and it's just kind of, we're moving it over to the warmer side, the redder side of the color spectrum instead of the yellow/green side. So we're going to move that just a bit further down like that. And then the yellow, we're going to do the same thing, although probably a little bit less, just moving it over to the warmer side. So that to me looks pretty good. Now we're going to move on to saturation, just up the top here. And I'm going to start to desaturate just some of the colors in the skin tones, so we're getting that nice look with the skin still, and it's not looking too saturated. So the reds I'm going to move down a little bit to around, say, minus 6. And oranges I'm going to move down to around about -7, and then we're going to move on to the yellows and move them down a little bit as well, just to around -12. So we're getting a better looking skin tone in terms of the vibrance at the moment. And then I'm going to go to the luminance. And what I always like to do with my beauty images in Lightroom, this is, I've actually done in my last tutorial the top 5 tips for retouching portraits in Photoshop. One of my top tips is actually by using a black and white adjustment layer to help bring back texture into model skin tones and things like that. And I find that the equivalent in Lightroom almost is using the orange tab under luminance, and it's usually orange. And we can kind of just move that down a little bit, and it brings a little bit more sharpness into the highlights, a little bit more texture, and kind of gives it that little bit more detail in the skin tone. So we'll move it around about to there. So that's looking pretty good to me at the moment. Now we're going to keep scrolling down to split toning. So split toning is one of the other ways, along with curves, that I really like to adjust the coloring in Lightroom. And we're first going to choose a highlight color. So like I said, I want the highlights to have that kind of warm, yellowy, retro feel to them. So I'm going to move over the hue to the yellow section. So around about to there. And the saturation, I'm going to move up to kind of give it that nice, warm, retro feel. So probably around about to there. And we're going to do the same thing with the shadows now. We're going to pick a color for the shadows. So I'm going to move over the hue right across towards the pinks and reds, because I usually find this is a nice retro combination with yellows, pinks and reds. So I reckon around about here. It's hard to see without the saturation sometimes, so I'm just going to move that up a little bit. So around about there, I'm just going to move the saturation down a little bit more. And then we're going to just tweak the balance a little bit. This is something that I like to do quite a bit when I'm working with split toning, just to see if I push it either way, what it kind of looks like. So I think in this case, I might actually move it back a little bit. We're going to move it back to around, say, -11. I'm sort of liking how that's looking at the moment. So for my final adjustments, I'm just going to go back up to the toning tab, and I'm going to move down the highlights just a little bit, because I feel like they're probably just a little bit too bright. And the whites we can move down just a little bit too. Sometimes you have to do this by eye and just kind of adjust as you go along. I've written down the basic guidelines for this preset actually before doing this tutorial, so I know roughly what I'm sort of aiming for color-wise, but sometimes it just works differently on every photo as well, so you just kind of have to adjust for that. So I'm just going to move down the exposure a little bit too. That's looking pretty good to me. And just going down to the saturation here on the highlights, I might just move that back a little bit more. Probably around to about 9, just as my final tweaking for this photo. So this is pretty much the finished look for my retro preset in Lightroom. So I'm going to do a before and after now, and you guys can see what it looks like. So this is the before image here, and now this is the after. So it kind of gives that really nice retro look, and I think that it really keeps the skin tone intact too, as much as possible. Like I said earlier on, sometimes it is hard to get some nice looking tones into your images while still keeping a relatively good skin tone intact. I am going to create a quick preset of this now and show you what it looks like maybe on just a couple of other images too. So we're just going to create a preset, so retro beauty. So let's see what this looks like on here. So you can see with the retro beauty action, it really does add that nice warm highlight look over the skin tone without making it look too strange. And we're going to just pick up another few just to test it out on, so you can see what it looks like on a pink backdrop. And let's have a look at a closer up image, because I always find they're good to kind of test on as well. And that's what the retro action looks like on that too. So it's working on closer up images and images that are further away, which is good. That's quite ideal actually. So guys, thank you so much for watching this tutorial today. I hope you really enjoyed it and I hope you learned something new from it. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please click the subscribe button along with the notification bell to make sure you can see all my videos that will be coming up in future weeks. If you do have any requests, please let me know in the comments section below. And thanks again so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!